The antiseptic smell hit Kevin Rourke before consciousness fully returned. His throat felt like he'd swallowed broken glass, and each breath scraped against his lungs. The beeping of machines surrounded him in the hospital room, but one sound cut through everything else, sobbing. Kevin's eyes cracked open. The world looked hazy through what felt like sandpaper covering his corneas. A figure sat hunched in the chair beside his bed, shoulders shaking with grief. Shirley. His voice came out as a rasp. His wife's head snapped up. Her face was streaked with tears, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Dark circles ringed her eyes like bruises. Kevin. She rushed to his bedside, grabbing his bandaged hand. Thank God you're awake. I thought I'd lost you both. Both? Kevin tried to sit up, but pain shot through his chest and arms. The memories came flooding back in fragments: smoke, heat, the sound of glass exploding. Eric. The name left his lips like a prayer. Where's Eric? Shirley's face crumpled. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks as she squeezed his hand tighter. Kevin, I'm so sorry. Eric didn't make it. The fire took everything. The words hit him like a physical blow. Kevin stared at his wife, waiting for her to take it back, to tell him she was wrong. But her tear-stained face told him everything. No. Kevin shook his head, ignoring the pain that flared in his neck. No, that's not. How did this happen? How do we get out, but not Eric? I pulled you from the bedroom. You wouldn't wake up. Shirley wiped her nose with a tissue. The smoke was so thick. I tried to go back for him, but the flames... She broke down again. Kevin closed his eyes. 8 years old. Eric had just turned 8 years old 3 weeks ago. They'd gone to the arcade, and Eric had beaten him at every racing game. His son's laugh echoed in his memory. The way Eric's eyes lit up when he explained the code he was writing for his school computer class. The funeral home needs to know about arrangements, Shirley whispered. But we can wait until you're stronger. Kevin opened his eyes and studied his wife's face. Something nagged at him, a detail that didn't fit, but the grief crushed everything else. His son was gone. Nothing else mattered. 2 hours after Shirley left to handle things at home, a man in a rumpled suit appeared in Kevin's doorway. He was tall and lean, with graying hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Mr. Rourke? I'm Detective Eli Barrow, Crestwood PD. The man stepped into the room without waiting for an invitation. Sorry to bother you during this difficult time. Kevin studied the detective's face. Is this about the fire? Do you know what caused it? Barrow pulled the visitor's chair closer to the bed and sat down. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and fixed Kevin with a steady gaze. Mr. Rourke, I've been investigating fires for 15 years. House fires, especially fatal ones, they leave patterns. Evidence. Barrow paused. Your fire, it's got some unusual characteristics. What kind of characteristics? Multiple ignition points. Accelerant residue in places that don't make sense for an accidental fire. Barrow's voice was calm, professional. The burn pattern suggests someone wanted that house to go up fast and hot. Kevin felt something cold settle in his stomach. You're saying someone started the fire on purpose? I'm saying that's what the evidence suggests. Barrow leaned back in his chair. Mr. Rourke, I need to ask you some questions about that night. About your wife's account of what happened. Shirley saved my life. She pulled me out. Yes, she told me that story. Very heroic. Barrow pulled out a small notebook. She said she woke up to smoke, tried to wake you, but you wouldn't respond. Then she dragged you outside and called 911. That's right. Here's the thing, Mr. Rourke. The 911 call came from a cell phone half a mile from your house. Your wife was calling from the Quickmart parking lot when she reported the fire. Kevin stared at the detective. Maybe she was getting help, looking for someone with a phone. Maybe. Barrow made a note. She also told the dispatcher that both you and your son were still inside. But when firefighters arrived, they only found evidence of one person in the master bedroom. No trace of your son anywhere in the house. The cold feeling in Kevin's stomach spread upward. What are you saying? Barrow closed his notebook and leaned forward again. Mr. Rourke, I've been doing this job long enough to know when something doesn't add up. Your wife's story has holes in it. My son is dead. My wife is grieving. Maybe she's confused about the details. Maybe. Barrow stood up. Or maybe there's more to this story than grief and confusion. The detective walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Mr. Rourke, are you ready to hear the truth? About her? Kevin felt his pulse quicken. What truth? I think your wife knows more about this fire than she's telling us. And I think you need to start asking yourself why. Barrow left Kevin alone with his thoughts and the steady beeping of hospital machines. Outside his window, Crestwood looked peaceful in the afternoon sun. But something dark had crept into Kevin's world, and he couldn't shake the feeling that Detective Barrow was right. That evening, alone in his hospital bed, Kevin forced himself to remember the night of the fire. The doctors had given him pain medication, but he fought against the drowsiness. He needed to think clearly. He remembered coming home from work late. Shirley had made dinner, something she rarely did anymore. She'd been unusually attentive, asking about his day, refilling his water glass. She'd insisted he take the sleep aid she'd picked up from the pharmacy. You've been having trouble sleeping, she'd said. This will help you rest. He'd taken the pill without question. Shirley had been a nurse before she quit 5 years ago. He trusted her medical judgment, but now Kevin remembered how heavy his sleep had been that night. Even with his usual insomnia, the sleep aid had knocked him out completely. So completely that smoke filling the house hadn't woken him. Kevin reached for his phone on the bedside table. His hands were still bandaged, making it difficult to navigate the screen, but he managed to pull up his text messages. The last conversation with Eric was from 2 days before the fire. Dad, can you help me with my Python code tonight? Of course, buddy. Save it for when I get home. Mom's friend is here again. The one with the truck. Kevin stared at that message. Eric had mentioned Mom's friend a few times over the past months. Kevin had assumed it was one of Shirley's nursing school friends, maybe someone from the book club she claimed to attend. But Eric had specifically mentioned a truck. Kevin scrolled through more messages, looking for other references. 3 weeks ago, Mom's friend brought pizza. He smells like cigarettes. 2 months ago, why does Mom's friend come over when you work late? Kevin's chest tightened. He'd been working overtime frequently, upgrading security systems for the school district. Long hours, but the extra money was supposed to help with Eric's college fund. How often had this friend been coming over? And why hadn't Shirley mentioned him? Kevin thought about other details from recent months. Shirley had become distant, irritable. She'd started locking her phone, something she'd never done before. She'd also been pushing for them to update their life insurance policies. We need more coverage, she'd said, especially with your job. What if something happened to you? Kevin had agreed. They'd increased both his and Eric's policies significantly. The premiums were high, but Shirley had insisted it was necessary. Now, lying in his hospital bed with his son gone and his house destroyed, Kevin wondered if Detective Barrow was right. Had there been signs he'd missed? Had he been so focused on work, so trusting of his wife, that he'd ignored what was happening in his own home? Kevin closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, he found himself planning. Tomorrow, he would start looking for answers. He would find out who Shirley's friend was. He would discover what really happened the night of the fire. And if Detective Barrow was right about Shirley, Kevin would make sure she paid for what she'd done. He didn't believe in forgiveness, only truth and justice. If his wife had taken his son from him, he would spend whatever time he had left making sure she faced the consequences. 3 days later, Kevin discharged himself from the hospital against medical advice. The bandages on his hands and arms made simple tasks difficult, but he couldn't spend another moment lying in that bed while questions burned in his mind. Shirley had protested his early discharge, hovering over him as he signed the papers. You need more time to heal. The doctor said a lot of things. Kevin's voice was flat. I need to see the house. Kevin, there's nothing left. It's just destruction. You don't need to put yourself through that. But Kevin was already walking toward the exit. He called a taxi from his hospital bed, and the driver was waiting in the pickup zone. The ride to their former neighborhood took 15 minutes. Kevin stared out the window at familiar streets, trying to reconcile the normalcy of suburban life with the chaos that had destroyed his family. The taxi stopped at what used to be 412 Maple Street. Kevin paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk, looking at the blackened skeleton of his home. The fire had been thorough. The roof had collapsed completely, leaving only charred support beams reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. The walls that remained standing were black with soot, the windows blown out and gaping. Kevin walked around the property's perimeter, studying the damage. The back of the house had suffered the worst destruction. The kitchen and family room were completely gone, reduced to a pile of ash and debris. He thought about Eric's bedroom, which had been in the back corner of the house. If his son had been sleeping there when the fire started, there should be some trace, some evidence of his presence. Kevin climbed over the police tape, ignoring the do not enter signs. His bandaged hands made it difficult to navigate the debris, but he pressed forward, in what had been Eric's room. Kevin found nothing. The fire had consumed everything: the twin bed, the desk where Eric worked on his computer programs, the bookshelf filled with science fiction novels. But as Kevin searched through the ash and charred wood, his foot hit something solid near what had been the back door. He knelt down and brushed away the debris. Eric's toy robot, the one he'd built from electronics kit last Christmas. The metal parts were scorched but intact, hidden beneath a fallen floorboard near the back door. Kevin picked up the robot with trembling hands. Eric never took this toy anywhere without asking permission. He certainly wouldn't have brought it to bed with him. The toy belonged on Eric's desk, but here it was, near the back door, as if someone had dropped it while carrying it outside. Kevin stood up, clutching the robot. Detective Barrow's words echoed in his mind. No trace of your son anywhere in the house. If Eric had died in his bedroom, this toy would have been destroyed with everything else. Instead, it was near the exit, as if Eric had been trying to leave the house when the fire started, or as if someone had been carrying Eric out of the house and dropped his toy in the process. Kevin's house was gone, but his laptop had been at his office the night of the fire. He drove there directly from the ruins, his mind racing with possibilities. The Crestwood School District's IT department was housed in a converted warehouse on the outskirts of town. Kevin had worked there for 6 years, managing security systems for all 12 schools in the district. His colleagues had sent flowers to the hospital, but Kevin hadn't been ready to face their sympathy. Now, sitting at his desk with Eric's scorched robot beside his keyboard, Kevin had work to do. First, he accessed the security footage from his home system. He'd installed cameras around the property 2 years ago, after a series of break-ins in the neighborhood. The main server had been destroyed in the fire, but the system automatically backed up footage to a cloud server every 24 hours. Kevin pulled up the footage from the week before the fire. Most of it showed routine family life: Eric getting on and off the school bus, Shirley coming and going in her Honda Civic, Kevin leaving for work in the mornings. But on Tuesday, 3 days before the fire, Kevin spotted something that made his blood run cold. At 2:47 p.m., while Kevin was at work and Eric was at school, a red pickup truck pulled into their driveway. A man got out, tall, muscular, with dark hair and a goatee. He walked to the front door like he belonged there. Shirley answered immediately, as if she'd been watching for him. They embraced on the front porch, and Kevin could see that this wasn't a casual hug between friends. This was intimate, passionate. Kevin fast-forwarded through the footage. The man didn't leave until 5:15 p.m., just 30 minutes before Eric's bus was due to arrive. Kevin checked more dates. The pattern was consistent. 2 or 3 times a week, always when Kevin was at work and Eric was at school, the red pickup truck would arrive. Sometimes the man would stay for hours. Kevin's jaw clenched as he watched his wife's betrayal play out on his computer screen. But infidelity wasn't the same as murder. He needed more evidence. He remembered Shirley's old laptop, the one she claimed was broken 6 months ago. She'd been using it before switching to a newer model, and Kevin had stored it in his office, thinking he might be able to repair it someday. The laptop was in his desk drawer, covered in dust. Kevin plugged it in and powered it up. Shirley had always been careless with technology, and she'd never properly wiped the hard drive. Kevin bypassed the password protection using tools he developed for the school district's IT security. Within minutes, he had access to all of Shirley's files. Most of it was mundane photos, music, old work documents from her nursing days. But Kevin found a folder labeled Personal that was password protected with military-grade encryption. This took longer to crack, but Kevin had both the time and the expertise. After 2 hours of running decryption algorithms, the folder opened. Inside, Kevin found a PDF file titled Insurance Policies Updated. The document contained detailed information about life insurance policies for both Kevin and Eric. Kevin's policy was worth $500,000. Eric's was worth $250,000, but these weren't the policies Kevin remembered signing. The beneficiary information had been changed. Instead of the standard surviving spouse and children designation, Shirley was listed as the sole beneficiary for both policies. Kevin printed the document and kept searching. He found another folder labeled Communications that contained exported chat logs from various messaging apps. The conversations were between Shirley and someone named RM. The messages went back 8 months, and they painted a picture of a relationship that had evolved from casual flirtation to something much darker. Done. Your husband works late again tonight? Shirley. Until 9. Same as always, Dem. Good. I need to see you. Shirley. What about after? When this is over, M. We'll be free. Both of us. No more sneaking around. The messages became more explicit as Kevin read on, but it was the recent conversations that made his hands shake with rage. Shirley. I can't keep living this lie. Kevin suspects something. M. Then we accelerate the timeline. Shirley. What about Eric? M. We discussed this. It has to look real. Complete. Shirley, I know. It's just, he's my son. M. He's your ticket to a new life. Don't lose your nerve now. Shirley. The insurance money will be enough for us to start over somewhere else. M. As long as there are no loose ends. The final message was timestamped 2 hours before the fire. M. Everything's ready. Make sure Kevin takes the pills. Shirley. Done. He's already asleep. M. See you on the other side, baby. Kevin leaned back in his chair, his heart pounding. The evidence was damning, but he needed more. He needed to know who RM was, and he needed to find out what had really happened to Eric. Because these messages suggested something Kevin hardly dared to hope that his son might still be alive. Kevin called his adopted sister Mira from his office. They'd grown up together in the foster system, and she was the only family he had left besides Eric. Mira was a licensed trauma therapist with a practice in Kansas City, and she had a sharp analytical mind that complemented Kevin's technical skills. I'm coming to Crestwood, Mira said when Kevin explained what he discovered. Don't do anything stupid until I get there. Mira arrived 2 hours later, carrying a briefcase and wearing the no-nonsense expression Kevin remembered from their childhood. She was 41, 2 years older than Kevin, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Show me everything, she said. Kevin walked her through the evidence, the security footage, the encrypted files, the insurance documents. Mira examined each piece carefully, making notes on a legal pad. The messaging logs are circumstantial, she said finally. A good defense attorney could argue they're fake or taken out of context. We need financial records. I don't have access to our joint accounts anymore. Shirley changed all the passwords after the fire. But you're still married and you're listed as a joint account holder. The bank has to give you access if you show up in person with proper identification. They drove to First National Bank of Crestwood, where Kevin and Shirley had banked for 8 years. The manager, Janet Wheeler, had known them both since they'd opened their first account together. Kevin, I'm so sorry for your loss, Janet said, ushering them into her office. How can I help you today? I need to review our account activity for the past 6 months, Kevin said. There may have been some unauthorized transactions. Janet looked uncomfortable. Kevin, your wife was here yesterday. She mentioned you might be coming in. She said the grief was making you paranoid, that you might make accusations. What kind of accusations? Mira asked. She suggested Kevin might blame her for the fire somehow. She seemed very concerned about his mental state. Kevin felt his jaw clench. Shirley was already building her defense, painting him as an unstable widower who couldn't accept the tragic loss of his son. Mrs. Wheeler, Kevin said carefully, I'm asking to review my own bank accounts. That's a legal right, not a paranoid delusion. Janet studied his face for a long moment, then turned to her computer. Of course. Let me pull up your records. The account activity painted a clear picture of preparation. Over the past 3 months, Shirley had made a series of large withdrawals, always in amounts just under $10,000, to avoid triggering federal reporting requirements. But it was the activity from the week before the fire that made Kevin's blood run cold. 3 days before the fire, Shirley had transferred $40,000 from her savings account to something called Crypto Secure Wallet Services. "I need details on this transaction," Kevin said, pointing to the screen. Janet clicked through several screens. It was a cryptocurrency purchase. Bitcoin transferred to a digital wallet. The receiving wallet is registered under the name Roy Mitchell. Kevin and Mira exchanged glances. RM Roy Mitchell. Or was it an alias? "Can you trace where the Bitcoin went after that?" Kevin asked. "I'm sorry, but once it's in a cryptocurrency wallet, it's outside our banking system. You need to contact the cryptocurrency exchange directly." Kevin nodded. He had other ways to trace digital transactions, tools he developed for tracking cybersecurity threats at the school district. "Janet," Kevin said, "I need you to freeze all joint accounts immediately. I believe my wife may be involved in fraud." Janet's face went pale. "Kevin, that's a very serious accusation." "Yes, it is, and I have evidence to support it." Kevin pulled out the printed insurance documents. "These policies were changed without my knowledge. The beneficiary information has been altered." Janet examined the documents. I need to make some phone calls. This is beyond my authority level." "Do what you need to do," Kevin said. "But freeze the accounts now, before any more money disappears." As they left the bank, Mira grabbed Kevin's arm. "We need to contact Detective Barrow. This is evidence of premeditation." "Not yet," Kevin said. "I need to find out who Roy Mitchell is first. And I need to find Eric." "Kevin, you realize what this means, don't you? If Shirley and this Mitchell person were planning to kill you for the insurance money, and if Eric's not really dead, then my son is being held somewhere against his will." Kevin's voice was cold. "And my wife is going to pay for every minute of terror she's put him through." Detective Barrow called Kevin the next morning. "Can you meet me at the station? I've got something you need to see." Kevin and Mira drove to the Crestwood Police Department, where Barrow led them to a small conference room. A laptop was set up on the table, connected to a large monitor. "Yesterday, I got a call from Missouri Department of Transportation," Barrow said. "They've been upgrading traffic cameras throughout the county, and they contract with utility companies to use their service roads for camera placement." Barrow clicked on a video file. "This footage is from a utility camera about a quarter-mile from your house. It's positioned to monitor traffic on Maple Street, but it also captures part of your neighborhood." The video was time-stamped 11:43 p.m. the night of the fire. Kevin watched as a Honda Civic Shirley's car pulled into view. But instead of driving toward their house, the car was heading away from the neighborhood. "That's Shirley's car," Kevin said. "Keep watching," Barrow said. In the passenger seat, barely visible but unmistakable, was a small figure. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but Kevin could make out dark hair and a slight build. Eric's size. Eric's profile. The fire department received the 911 call at 11:52 p.m., Barrow continued. "This footage shows your wife driving away from the area 9 minutes before she reported the fire." Kevin stared at the screen. "If Eric died in the fire, who's in the car? That's the question, isn't it?" Barrow paused the video. "I've got more. The same camera picked up your wife's car returning to the area at 12:15 a.m., about 20 minutes after the fire department arrived." Barrow played another clip. This time, Shirley's car was alone, no passenger visible. "Where did she go during those 33 minutes?" Mira asked. "I've been working on that," Barrow said. "I've requested footage from other traffic cameras along possible routes. It's going to take time to get all the data, but I'm building a timeline." Kevin felt something he hadn't experienced since waking up in the hospital. "Hope. You think Eric is alive. I think your wife staged your son's death," Barrow said carefully. "Whether he's alive or not, I can't say for certain. But the evidence suggests she removed him from the house before the fire started." Kevin thought about the messages between Shirley and Roy Mitchell. "What about Eric? He's your ticket to a new life." "There's someone else involved," Kevin said. "A man named Roy Mitchell. My wife's been having an affair with him." Kevin pulled out printed copies of the bank records and messaging logs. Barrow examined them carefully, making notes in his case file. "Roy Mitchell," Barrow mused. "The name's familiar. Let me run it through our database." Barrow typed on his laptop for several minutes. Then his expression grew grim. Royce Madden. Goes by Roy Mitchell sometimes. He's got a record: assault, domestic violence, petty theft. He was a firefighter in Kansas City until he was discharged for misconduct 3 years ago. A firefighter, Kevin said. That explains how he knew how to set the fire. There's more. Barrow continued reading. Madden was investigated for insurance fraud 2 years ago. The case was dropped due to insufficient evidence, but the pattern fits. House fires, mysterious circumstances, insurance payouts. Kevin felt rage building in his chest. His wife hadn't just betrayed their marriage, she'd partnered with a career criminal to destroy their family. What's our next step? Kevin asked. Officially, I need to build a case that will hold up in court, Barrow said. Unofficially, I need to find your son before these people decide he's too much of a liability to keep alive. Barrow's words hit Kevin like ice water. He'd been focused on proving Shirley's guilt, but he hadn't considered the immediate danger Eric might be in. How long do we have? Kevin asked. I don't know, Barrow admitted. But if your wife thinks you're getting too close to the truth, Kevin stood up abruptly. I need to find him now. Kevin, wait. Barrow held up a hand. We can't go off half-cocked. If we spook them, they might run. Or worse. Then what do you suggest? Surveillance. I'll get a warrant to track your wife's movements. You go home, act normal, don't let her know you suspect anything. If she leads us to your son, we'll have them both. Kevin wanted to argue, but Mira touched his arm. He's right. If Eric is alive, we have to be smart about this. Kevin nodded reluctantly. But privately, he was already making his own plans. He wouldn't sit back and wait while his son's life hung in the balance. Kevin couldn't sleep that night. He'd gone through the motions of normalcy, returning to the hotel where he and Shirley were staying temporarily, eating dinner, watching television. But every moment felt like a lie. Shirley had been unusually attentive, asking about his day, expressing concern about his emotional state. Maybe you should talk to someone, she'd suggested. A grief counselor. This has been traumatic for both of us. Kevin had agreed, playing the role of the grieving father who needed professional help to cope with his loss. But inside, he was planning at 8:02 a.m. Kevin slipped out of the hotel room. Mira was waiting in the parking lot, her car running. Are you sure about this? She asked as Kevin got into the passenger seat. Barrow's right that we need to be careful, Kevin said. But I'm not waiting for warrants and official procedures. If Eric is out there, I'm going to find him tonight. They'd spent hours studying property records and cross-referencing them with known associates of Royce Madden. Kevin had used his IT access to pull motor vehicle records, utility bills, and tax documents. One address had stood out: a rural property registered to Madden's cousin, about 20 miles outside of Crestwood. The drive took them through increasingly isolated farmland. The property was at the end of a dirt road, hidden behind a stand of oak trees. Kevin could see a single trailer and an old barn, both dark against the night sky. Mira parked a quarter-mile away, behind an abandoned gas station. They brought binoculars and a camera with a telephoto lens. I don't see any vehicles, Mira whispered as they crept closer to the property. They might be parked behind the trailer, Kevin replied. They found a position in the tree line that gave them a clear view of the trailer. Kevin focused the binoculars on the windows, looking for any sign of life inside. There, Mira pointed to a side window. I saw movement. Kevin adjusted the binoculars. A shadow passed in front of the window. Someone inside the trailer was awake. They waited for 2 hours, taking turns with the binoculars. As dawn approached, Kevin was beginning to think they'd found the wrong place. Then the trailer door opened. Shirley stepped outside, carrying a cup of coffee. She was wearing clothes Kevin had never seen before: jeans and a flannel shirt that looked like they belonged to a man. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. A few minutes later, a second figure emerged from the trailer. Royce Madden was taller than he'd appeared in the security footage, with the kind of lean muscle that came from physical labor. He walked to Shirley and kissed her casually, like they'd been living together for years. Kevin's hand shook as he held the binoculars. Seeing his wife's betrayal played out in person was somehow worse than watching it on a computer screen. But where was Eric? As if in answer to his question, the trailer door opened again. A small figure stepped onto the makeshift porch, stretching in the morning sunlight. Eric. Alive, unharmed, wearing pajamas Kevin didn't recognize. Kevin nearly stood up before Mira grabbed his arm. "Don't," she hissed. "Not yet." Kevin forced himself to remain hidden, but his heart was racing. His son was alive. Eric looked healthy, maybe even relaxed. Whatever story Shirley and Madden had told him, Eric seemed to believe it. They watched as Shirley brought Eric a bowl of cereal. The three of them sat on the porch like a family having breakfast together. Eric was talking animatedly, gesturing with his spoon, and both adults were listening and responding. It was a grotesque parody of normal family life, and Kevin had to fight the urge to storm across the clearing and take his son back by force. "We need to call Barrow," Mira whispered. Kevin nodded, pulling out his phone. But as he dialed, he kept his eyes on Eric. His son was playing with something in his hand, a small electronic device that looked like the handheld games Kevin had bought him for his birthday. Eric was not only alive, he seemed content, which meant Shirley and Madden had convinced him that his father was dead, that his old life was over, and that this was his new family. The thought made Kevin's vision go red with rage. When Detective Barrow answered the phone, Kevin's voice was deadly calm. "I found them," Kevin said, "and I'm going to need you to bring a lot of backup." Detective Barrow arrived with a full tactical team within an hour. Kevin and Mira had maintained their surveillance position, documenting everything they saw and photographed evidence of the three people living together in the trailer. Barrow reviewed Kevin's photos on the camera's LCD screen. "This is good evidence, but we need to be careful about how we handle the rescue. If they've convinced your son that you're dead, seeing you suddenly appear might traumatize him, more than being kidnapped by his mother and her boyfriend." Kevin's voice was bitter. "Kevin, I know this is hard, but we need to think about Eric's psychological state. According to these photos, he doesn't look like he's being held against his will." Kevin studied the images they captured. Eric laughing at something Madden had said. Eric helping Shirley hang laundry on a makeshift clothesline. Eric playing catch with a worn baseball. "They've been conditioning him," Mira said. "Classic psychological manipulation. They've created a false reality where this situation feels normal, even positive, which is why we need to handle this carefully," Barrow agreed. "I've got Child Protective Services on standby, along with a child psychologist who specializes in trauma cases." Barrow's radio crackled. "Detective, we've got movement at the property." Through his binoculars, Kevin saw Madden walking to an old pickup truck parked behind a barn. Shirley was beside him, and they appeared to be having an intense conversation. "They're leaving," Kevin said. "Just Madden," Barrow observed. "Your wife is going back inside." Madden drove away in the pickup truck, leaving Shirley and Eric alone at the trailer. Barrow made a decision. "This is our opportunity. With Madden gone, we can move in with minimal risk." Barrow coordinated with his team over the radio. Officers would surround the property while Barrow, Kevin, and the child psychologist Dr. Sarah Chun, who had arrived with the tactical team, approached the trailer directly. "Mr. Rourke, I need you to let me handle the initial contact with your son," Dr. Chun said. "Seeing you suddenly might be overwhelming for him." Kevin wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. His priority was Eric's well-being, not his own need for immediate reunion. They moved in at 10:15 a.m. Kevin watched from behind a police car as Dr. Chun approached the trailer with Barrow. His hands were clenched into fists, and every instinct screamed at him to run to his son. Barrow knocked on the trailer door. "Mrs. Rourke? This is Detective Barrow, Crestwood Police. I need to speak with you." There was a long pause before the door opened. Shirley appeared, her face carefully composed. "Detective Barrow, what brings you out here?" "We need to talk about your son, Mrs. Rourke. We know Eric is alive." Kevin saw Shirley's mask slip for just a moment's surprise, fear, and calculation flickering across her features. Then she recovered her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about. Eric died in the fire." "Mrs. Rourke, we have surveillance footage of you leaving your neighborhood with Eric in your car before the fire started. We have financial records showing large cash transfers to Royce Madden. And we have Eric on camera playing in the yard of this property yesterday morning." Shirley's shoulders sagged slightly. Behind her, Kevin could see Eric peering around the corner of the trailer's narrow hallway. "Eric," Dr. Chun called gently. "My name is Dr. Chun. I'm here to help you." Eric stepped into view. He looked exactly as Kevin remembered dark hair that needed cutting, intelligent brown eyes, the slight build that made him look younger than his 8 years. But his expression was confused, wary. "Where's Roy?" Eric asked, looking at his mother. "He'll be back soon, honey," Shirley said. "These people are just confused about some things." "Eric," Dr. Chen said, crouching down to his eye level. "I know this is scary, but I need you to know that your father is alive. He's been looking for you." Eric's face scrunched in confusion. "My dad died in the fire. Mom told me." "Your mom was wrong, Eric. Your dad is here, and he wants to see you very much." Kevin couldn't wait any longer. He stepped out from behind the police car, moving slowly so he wouldn't frighten his son. Eric's eyes went wide. He stared at Kevin for a long moment. His young mind tried to process the impossible: his dead father, standing in front of him, very much alive. "Dad." Eric's voice was barely a whisper. "Yeah, buddy, it's me." Eric looked back and forth between Kevin and Shirley, confusion evident on his face. "But Mom said, she said you didn't make it out of the fire." Kevin knelt down, bringing himself to Eric's eye level. "Mom was wrong, Eric. I'm alive, and I've been looking for you ever since the fire." Eric took a tentative step toward his father, then stopped and looked back at Shirley. "Mom, why did you tell me Dad was dead?" Shirley's carefully constructed facade finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face as she realized her plan had completely unraveled. I thought it would be easier for you, honey. You thought it would be easier to steal our son and collect insurance money," Kevin said, his voice hard. "You thought it would be easier to let me believe Eric was dead while you played house with your boyfriend." Eric's face went pale as the adult's words began to make sense to him. "Mom, what is Dad talking about?" Dr. Chin stepped forward. "Eric, why don't you come with me? We need to have a talk while the adults sort some things out." Eric looked at Kevin one more time, uncertainty evident in his young face. "Dad, are you really alive?" "I'm really alive, buddy. And I'm never going to let anyone take you away from me again." As Dr. Chun led Eric away from the trailer, Barrow moved in to arrest Shirley. Kevin watched his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, as handcuffs were placed around her wrists. "Kevin, you have to understand," Shirley said desperately. "I never meant for things to go this far. I wanted a different life." Kevin stared at her with cold eyes. "You wanted a different life, so you decided to kill me and traumatize our son. You made Eric believe his father was dead. I would never have hurt him. I'm his mother. You stopped being his mother the moment you chose Royce Madden over your family." As Shirley was led away to a police car, Kevin felt no satisfaction, no sense of justice served. All he felt was an overwhelming need to hold his son and begin the long process of healing the damage that had been done. 6 weeks later, Kevin sat in the office of Prosecutor Janet Williams, watching her review the mountain of evidence they'd assembled against Shirley and Royce Madden. Eric was in therapy 3 times a week with Dr. Chun, slowly processing the trauma of believing his father was dead and the confusion of learning his mother had lied to him. Kevin had taken leave from his job to focus on his son's recovery, and they were staying with Mira while looking for a new home. "The evidence is overwhelming," Williams said, looking up from the files spread across her desk. "This isn't just arson. We're looking at attempted murder, insurance fraud, kidnapping, and conspiracy charges." Detective Barrow sat across from Kevin, a satisfied expression on his weathered face. "Madden's attorney has been asking about a plea deal. He wants to testify against your wife in exchange for a reduced sentence." "What kind of deal?" Kevin asked. 20 years instead of life without parole," Williams replied. "In exchange for full cooperation and testimony about Mrs. Rourke's role in planning the fire." Kevin considered this. Part of him wanted both Shirley and Madden to face the maximum penalty for what they'd done. But another part of him recognized that Madden's testimony would guarantee Shirley's conviction. What would he testify to? Williams pulled out a transcript. "According to his preliminary statement, your wife was the mastermind behind the entire scheme. She approached him with a plan, provided detailed information about your routines and the house layout, and transferred the money for expenses. She also personally administered the sleep medication that rendered you unconscious," Barrow added. "Madden will testify that she insisted on handling that part herself because of her nursing background." Kevin felt his jaw clench. The image of Shirley carefully drugging him, knowing she was planning to leave him to die in the fire, filled him with fresh rage. "There's more," Williams continued. "Madden claims that Mrs. Rourke initially wanted Eric to die in the fire as well. She only agreed to fake his death when Madden convinced her it would be too risky." Kevin's hands formed fists. She was going to kill her own son for insurance money. According to Madden, yes. He says he talked her out of it by pointing out that Eric's death would bring more scrutiny from investigators. So Madden saved Eric's life. Kevin's voice was bitter. Not out of compassion, Barrows said. Out of self-preservation. He knew that dead children bring federal attention, and he didn't want that kind of heat. Williams closed the file. "Mr. Rourke, I need to ask you how you feel about the plea agreement. Your opinion won't determine my decision, but I want to know where you stand." Kevin thought about Eric, who still woke up, sometimes crying for his mother despite everything she'd done. Kevin thought about the months of therapy ahead, the long process of rebuilding their relationship, and Eric's sense of security. "I want her to face the full consequences of what she did," Kevin said finally. "But I also want to be sure she's convicted. If Madden's testimony guarantees that, then I support the deal. She'll still be looking at 40 years to life," Williams said. "With the evidence we have, including Madden's testimony, she won't see the outside of a prison again." Kevin nodded. "Then do it." Over the following weeks, more evidence emerged as investigators dug deeper into Shirley and Madden's activities. They found additional bank accounts, more encrypted communications, and evidence that the couple had been researching how to assume new identities after collecting the insurance money. Most damaging was a series of recordings Madden had made on his phone insurance against Shirley if their relationship went sour. The recordings captured Shirley discussing the details of Kevin's murder, her plans for Eric's fake death, and her excitement about starting a new life with the insurance money. Child Protective Services completed their evaluation of Eric's case. Dr. Chin reported that while Eric was showing signs of psychological manipulation and trauma, he was resilient and responding well to therapy. The most important factor in Eric's recovery, Dr. Chin told Kevin, is his relationship with you. Despite everything that happened, he knows his father loves him and fought to find him. That foundation of trust is what will help him heal. As the case built toward trial, Kevin began to feel something he hadn't experienced since the night of the fire, a sense that justice might actually be served. The trial of Shirley Rourke began on a cold morning in February. Kevin sat in the front row of the courtroom gallery, with Mira beside him for support. Eric was not in attendance. Dr. Chun had advised against exposing him to the detailed accounts of his mother's crimes. Shirley sat at the defendant's table with her attorney, Marcus Webb, an expensive lawyer she'd somehow managed to hire despite the frozen assets. She looked different, thinner, paler, her auburn hair pulled back severely. She wore a conservative blue suit that Kevin suspected was calculated to make her appear sympathetic. She hadn't looked at Kevin once since entering the courtroom. Prosecutor Williams began her opening statement by laying out the timeline of the crime. She used a large display screen to show the jury surveillance footage, bank records, and physical evidence from the fire scene. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about greed, betrayal, and the willingness of a mother to sacrifice her own family for money," Williams said. "The evidence will show that Shirley Rourke, with her co-conspirator Royce Madden, planned and executed an elaborate scheme to murder her husband, fake her son's death, and collect over $750,000 in life insurance benefits." Williams clicked to a photo of Kevin in his hospital bed, bandaged and unconscious. Kevin Rourke survived this fire only by chance. The defendant believed she had given him enough sedatives to ensure he would never wake up. She left him to burn to death in their family home. Next came a photo of Eric at the trailer, playing in the yard while Shirley watched. Meanwhile, she held her 8-year-old son captive, allowing him to believe his father was dead, preparing to disappear with him to start a new life built on blood money. Kevin watched the jury as Williams presented the evidence. Their faces showed a mixture of shock and disgust as the full scope of Shirley's crimes became clear. Defense attorney Webb tried to paint Shirley as a victim of domestic abuse who had been manipulated by Royce Madden. He suggested that she had been coerced into participating in a plan she never fully understood. "My client is not a criminal mastermind," Webb argued. She is a frightened woman who fell under the influence of a dangerous man. Yes, she made terrible decisions. Yes, she caused immense pain to her family. But the evidence will show that Royce Madden was the driving force behind these crimes. Kevin felt his anger rise as Webb tried to portray Shirley as another victim. The encrypted messages, the financial records, the insurance policy changes, all of that evidence showed Shirley as an active, calculating participant in the scheme. The prosecution's first witness was Detective Barrow, who walked the jury through the investigation step by step. Barrow's calm, methodical presentation of the evidence was devastating to the defense. The physical evidence at the fire scene showed multiple ignition points and the use of accelerants, Barrow testified. This was not an accidental fire. Someone with knowledge of fire behavior had deliberately set this fire to burn hot and fast. Next came the financial evidence. The bank manager testified about the large cash withdrawals and cryptocurrency transfers. A computer forensics expert explained how Kevin had discovered the encrypted communications between Shirley and Madden, but the most powerful testimony came from Royce Madden himself. Madden took the stand wearing prison orange, his hand shackled. He looked smaller and less threatening than he had in the surveillance footage, but his testimony was chilling in its detail. Shirley came to me with a plan, Madden said in response to Williams' questions. She said she was tired of being married to Kevin, tired of being a mother. She wanted out, but she wanted the insurance money too. Did Mrs. Rourke suggest harming her son, Eric? At first, yeah. She said it would be cleaner if the whole family died in the fire. But I told her that dead kids bring too much attention from investigators. Kevin felt sick listening to Madden describe how casually Shirley had discussed murdering her own child, who provided the details about the house layout and Mr. Rourke's routines. All Shirley. She drew me maps of the house, told me where Kevin slept when he took his sleep medication. She handled all the planning. Did Mrs. Rourke express any reluctance about the plan? Not really. She was excited about it, actually. She kept talking about how we'd be free to be together, how we'd take Eric and start over somewhere new. Defense attorney Webb tried to undermine Madden's testimony during cross-examination, suggesting he was lying to reduce his own sentence. But the physical evidence corroborated every detail of Madden's account. The trial continued for 2 weeks, with expert witnesses explaining fire patterns, financial crimes, and the psychological impact on Eric. Each day, the evidence against Shirley mounted higher. Kevin watched his wife throughout the proceedings, looking for some sign of remorse, some indication that she understood the magnitude of what she'd done. But Shirley remained impassive, occasionally whispering to her attorney, but never showing emotion. As the prosecution rested its case, Kevin felt confident that justice would be served. The evidence was overwhelming, and Shirley's defense had failed to offer any credible alternative explanation for the crimes. On the final day of testimony, Prosecutor Williams called Kevin to the witness stand. He'd been dreading this moment, having to relive the trauma in front of a courtroom full of strangers, with Shirley watching every word. But as Kevin walked to the witness stand, he felt a sense of calm determination. This was his chance to speak for Eric, to make sure the jury understood the full impact of Shirley's crimes. Williams began with basic questions about Kevin's background, his job, his relationship with Eric. Then she moved to the night of the fire. Mr. Rourke, can you describe your condition when you woke up in the hospital? I could barely breathe. My throat and lungs felt like they were on fire. I was confused, disoriented, but all I could think about was Eric. What did your wife tell you about Eric? Kevin's voice remained steady. She told me he was dead. She said the fire took everything, that she tried to save him but couldn't. How did that make you feel? Destroyed. Eric was everything to me. The thought that I lost him. Kevin paused, collecting himself. I wanted to die too. Williams walked Kevin through the investigation, his discovery of the evidence, the surveillance of the trailer where Eric was being held. Mr. Rourke, when you saw your son alive at that trailer, what went through your mind? Relief. Overwhelming relief that he was okay. But also rage. Rage that my wife had put him through that trauma, had made him believe I was dead. Do you believe your wife was capable of the crime she's accused of? Kevin looked directly at Shirley for the first time since the trial began. She met his gaze with cold, defiant eyes. I used to think I knew her, Kevin said. I thought she was a good mother, a good wife. But the evidence shows she was willing to kill me and kidnap our son for money. So yes, I believe she's capable of anything. Defense attorney Webb's cross-examination tried to suggest that Kevin was an absent father who had driven Shirley to desperation through neglect and emotional abandonment. Mr. Rourke, isn't it true that you worked long hours and left most of the child care to your wife? I worked overtime to provide for my family, but I was never absent from Eric's life. I helped with homework, attended school events, spent time with him every day. Didn't your wife express unhappiness with your marriage? If she was unhappy, she never communicated that to me directly. She communicated it to Royce Madden through encrypted messages while planning my murder. Webb tried several more approaches, but Kevin remained calm and factual in his responses. The defense's strategy of blaming Kevin for driving Shirley to commit crimes fell flat against the overwhelming evidence of premeditation. When Kevin stepped down from the witness stand, he felt a sense of completion. He told his story truthfully and completely. The rest was up to the jury. The closing arguments were powerful. Williams summarized the evidence methodically, painting a picture of calculated betrayal and attempted murder. Shirley Rourke is not a victim, Williams told the jury. She is a woman who decided that her husband's life and her son's well-being were worth less than $750,000 in insurance money. She drugged her husband, set fire to their home, kidnapped their child, and tried to start a new life built on lies and blood money. Defense attorney Webb made one final attempt to portray Shirley as a troubled woman who had been manipulated by Royce Madden. My client made terrible mistakes, but they were the mistakes of a woman in crisis, not a calculating killer, Webb argued. She needs help, not decades in prison. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, their verdict was swift and decisive. Guilty on all counts. Kevin felt a wave of relief wash over him as the judge read the jury's verdict. Shirley was convicted of attempted murder, arson, insurance fraud, kidnapping, and conspiracy. The judge set sentencing for the following month. Escort officers led Shirley away in handcuffs. She finally turned to look at Kevin. For a moment, her mask of composure slipped, and he saw something in her eyes, not remorse, but anger. You were already dead to me, Kevin, she said, her voice carrying across the courtroom. I just needed it to be real. Kevin stared back at her without flinching. The only thing that's dead is whatever love I had for you. Eric and I are going to build a new life, and you'll never be part of it. Those were the last words they would ever speak to each other. The house Kevin bought in Springfield was nothing like their old home in Crestwood. It was smaller, older, but it had something their previous house had never possessed: peace. Kevin and Eric lived there with Mira, who had relocated her therapy practice to be closer to them. The arrangement worked well for everyone. Mira provided stability and emotional support, while Kevin and Eric rebuilt their relationship. Eric was doing well in his new school. The nightmares had mostly stopped, and Dr. Chin reported that he was making excellent progress in therapy. He'd started coding again, creating simple games on Kevin's laptop, and he'd joined the school's robotics club. That on this particular evening, Kevin sat on the front porch with Eric, watching the sunset over the Missouri countryside. Eric was working on a programming project, occasionally asking Kevin questions about Python syntax. Dad, Eric said, looking up from the laptop, do you think Mom misses us? It was a question Eric asked sometimes, usually when he was tired or reflective. Kevin had learned to answer honestly but gently. Maybe, Kevin said, but we don't miss lies, Eric. We live in truth now. Eric nodded thoughtfully. I like the truth better, even when it's sad. Me too, buddy. Shirley had been sentenced to 40 years in prison without the possibility of parole. She would be nearly 75 years old before she could even apply for release. Kevin had felt no satisfaction in her sentencing, only a sense of closure. Royce Madden had received 20 years as part of his plea agreement. Kevin hoped both of them would spend their prison time reflecting on the damage they'd caused, but he didn't waste mental energy thinking about either of them. His focus was on the future: Eric's education, their relationship, building a life free from deception and betrayal. Dad, Eric said, still looking at his computer screen. I'm writing a program that can detect when people are lying by analyzing their word patterns. Do you think that's possible? Kevin smiled. His son's analytical mind was already working to prevent future deceptions. It's definitely possible, Eric. Want me to help you with the algorithm? As they worked together on Eric's project, Kevin felt something he hadn't experienced in years: contentment. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Eric would always carry some scars for what Shirley had done to him. Kevin would always struggle with the knowledge that he'd trusted someone who had planned his murder. But they had each other, and they had the truth. After everything they'd been through, that felt like enough. The sun set over their new home, and Kevin Rourke finally felt like he could breathe again.